Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today is the first session of a two-day webinar where we're going to discuss top pharmaceutical artificial intelligence deals that took place in 2020 and Q1 of this year. Our long-term goal is to offer a series of webinars which will cover the top trend in the pharmaceutical industry in general, as well as AI and pharma sector specifically. With this, let me proceed with my screen share. Today's webinar is organized by Deep Pharma Intelligence. It is a new analytical joint venture formed by Deep Knowledge Analytics and Biopharma Trend. As many of you may know, Deep Knowledge Analytics has been producing a number of reports, both proprietary and open access, for a number of years. And Biopharma Trend is a reputable digital hub that brings together the top news, articles, market insights, and business intelligence with respect to pharma, biotech, and healthcare industries. Together, Deep Knowledge Analytics and Biopharma Trend inherit full set of analytics as well as expertise accumulated for over 3 years by the Pharma division of Deep Knowledge Analytics. My name is Kate Butts. I'm a managing partner of Deep Knowledge Group, and I'm delighted to be a co-host of today's webinar. I'm excited to be joined by a number of speakers, and I will elaborate on everyone's background as well as scope of their presentation on the next slide. One of the topics that we're going to discuss today are the key takeaways by our speakers from the newest special analytical case study prepared by Deep Pharma Intelligence. And this case study focuses on top AI and pharma deals that took place in 2020 and Q1 of this year. It is an open access study, and you can download it at www.deep-pharma.tech. Our speakers today include Dr. Andrey Bavila, who is a director of Deep Pharma Intelligence and co-founder of Biopharma Trend. Andrey will cover the biggest deals, partnerships, and collaborations in 2020, as well as what's to come in 2021 in the sector of AI and pharma. We also have Igor Kondyukhov, who is head of algorithmic analytics of Deep Pharma Intelligence, and he will share his insights with respect to the big data analytical tools and AI technologies utilized by Deep Pharma Intelligence in its analytics. We will also have Franco Cortez, who will help me co-host today's webinar. Franco has been a director of Agent Analytics Agency since 2017, and he will address the topic of how COVID-19 became a driving factor for the growth of the biotech industry. We will also have Christopher Trammer, the CEO of Therapeutics. Christopher will address the key trends and insights in AI and drug discovery sphere. One of the key objectives of today's session is to cover collaborations between AI companies and big pharma corporations. Specifically, we're interested to see how AI companies are participating in big pharma transactions. Further, we would like to pay attention on how big pharma corporations are utilizing AI in their operations. I've mentioned that it's a two-day webinar, and we hope to see you again tomorrow at the same time, 5 p.m. GMT. It's going to be an exciting event focusing on investment and M&A deals in AI and pharma market. In addition to some of today's speakers, we're delighted to also host Dmitry Kaminsky, the co-founder and managing partner of Deep Knowledge Group, as well as Ian Inkster, head of policy analytics at Agent Analytics Agency. Tomorrow's event will be of special interest to investors because speakers will highlight the key takeaways from the recently released open access investment digest by Deep Pharma Intelligence. Again, it's an open access study, and you can download it at the link specified at the bottom of this page. If you're interested in the work that we do, feel free to subscribe to our news, obtain most recent versions of our open access analytics. The details are specified on this slide. With this, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Andrey Bavila, who is a director of Deep Pharma Intelligence and co-founder of Biopharma Trend. Andrey holds a PhD in physical chemistry. He's an industry expert in AI and pharma. He publishes extensively, including in Forbes, and his works have been widely cited, including by Deloitte. Andrey will cover the top deals, collaborations, and partnerships in AI and pharma in 2020 and Q1 of 2021. Andrey, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kate, for the introduction. It's my great pleasure to be talking today at this wonderful event. And as Kate mentioned, I'm leading Deep Pharma Intelligence, which is a joint venture between Deep Knowledge Analytics, the leading UK analytics hub, and Biopharma Trend, of which I am the co-founder. Biopharma Trend has been on the market since 2016, providing great insights into the emerging areas of the biotech industry. Today, I'd like to go over some highlights and our findings from a recent report, Pharmaceutical Artificial Intelligence Deals and Market 2020-2021. The report can be downloaded on our website following the link on the slide. It is extremely important to mention, I guess, that the last year was a paradoxical year for the biotech community because actually the pandemics affected a lot of industries. Pretty much the whole world was shut down, and a lot of business and R&D disruptions happened everywhere. But the biotech industry was on the rise nonetheless. In fact, it was booming. The IPO deal activity hit its all-time record high in 2020, and biotech stock index as well hit an all-time high. The venture capital was pouring into new ventures, and not necessarily related to COVID, but actually in pretty much every therapeutics area. And in fact, FDA approved 53 new medicines, which is kind of a very productive year for the approvals. And AI and drug discovery sector has been growing as well. And a lot of highly priced IPOs happened, and around $2 billion was spent in venture capital allocation to fund biotech companies. And a lot of R&D deals were happening in the area, basically illustrating the demand for the new technology. So the community of the artificial intelligence is pretty diverse these days. It is represented by largest pharma corporations, which are developing in-house programs actively. Pretty much everybody is doing this right now. And also a lot of biotech startups, more than 250 companies right now actively operating in this area and collaborating with pharma companies and all the other players. We also have CROs, which are quite active in the application of AI, and they're kind of competing with the big pharma corporations because they try to apply AI to improve their value offering. And also we have newcomers such as big tech corporations, Google, Tencent, Baidu, and others, who are essentially leveraging their cutting-edge technology and entering into new space for them, but they leverage the computational resources to rapidly expand into healthcare. So the interest of big pharma companies towards the AI technologies is reflected by a growing number of AI deals. And in fact, 2020 was kind of a busy year in this regard, with at least 30 major deals recorded, and a lot more smaller deals, probably hundreds of deals on a much smaller scale. And of course, it's important to note why it's happening. Why is this interest towards the application of AI is so growing? In fact, the AI is an old concept which originated in the middle of the last century, and a lot of theory has been available by 2020s. But probably, basically, because of the lack of computational power, computational resources, and many other technologies auxiliary to the AI were absent in last century, it was not possible for the technology to actually gain the commercial value at the scale. And things started to change around a decade ago, when essentially substantial advances in deep learning happened with the ImageNet competition. And then several years later, a new infrastructure for neural nets and new algorithms emerged, like, for example, generative adversarial networks, which provided for the ability to do generative chemistry at a new level. And then in 2018, 2019, a number of substantial discoveries in heat discovery space happened, which brought major validation for the AI technology, showing everyone that essentially the technology is already mature enough to disrupt the usual way the drugs are discovered. And the technology keeps maturing till these days. So the landscape of the collaborations is quite diverse, and we have some already formed the leading pack of the big pharma companies who very intensively collaborate with third-party biotech companies, trying to probe the grounds in various aspects of AI application, all the way from heat discovery to target identification, building ontologies for diseases, and all the way to clinical trials, where AI is used not only to operational stuff, like, for example, finding the right patients for the clinical trials, but also for trying to get the success rates, predict the success rates of clinical trials, essentially saving costs and assessing risks. So among the leaders, we have Pfizer, Bayer, Johnson & Johnson, Roche, AstraZeneca, and others. And but the dynamics of this graph is changing rapidly, with pretty much every month a new collaboration happening in the area. So here's just several examples of collaborations which basically illustrate the trend. And as you can see, it's some of the collaborations have up to $1 billion in possible royalty payments and multi-million advance payment checks. So this area is kind of well funded in this regard. So the venture capital area is also very crowded, and here just a brief overview of major rounds raised by AI biotechs over 2020 and 2021, essentially with such heavy hitters like Xtalpi with more than 300 million raised, Vala Health with 190 million raised just weeks ago, and others. You can, by the way, find more information about venture deals by requesting access to our analytics platform, where we have been tracking the data on this for the last, I guess, 5 to 7 years. Among the IPO, there is 7 IPOs that happened in this space, including companies like oncology-focused London Pharma, Therapeutics, Pharma, very well-known IPO was done by Schrödinger. And by the way, Pharma and Schrödinger were really high on the valuation of their IPOs. In the merger and acquisition space, the number of deals is smaller, but still quite significant. And for example, Therapeutics was acquired by Astellas, and Haystack Sciences was acquired by In Citro. And just days ago, Rovian Sciences absorbed Silicon Therapeutics for as much as 150 million. And again, I suggest you visit our platform to learn more about this and other collaborations. If we see the list of leading pharma companies by the amount of collaborations, we have seen one picture several slides back, but if we add information about VC investments by big pharma corporations, which they typically do through their VC arms, and M&A activities of the pharma companies, then the list a little bit different now, but not that much. Still, we have Pfizer, Bayer, Roche, Johnson & Johnson among some of the leading companies in adopting AI technology for drug discovery and clinical research. Here's another part of data on this. And again, as I mentioned, the collaborations are focusing on a whole spectrum of research process, starting from the very beginning, from mining data from literature and building ontologies on the diseases, finding new targets, etc., and all the way to hit discovery, lead optimization, preclinical studies, some of them are also enabled by AI technologies, and even clinical trials. But it is very extremely important to note that new kind of players are entering the biopharmaceutical space. I would say not traditional players. These are the companies that are enabled primarily by AI technology. These include big tech corporations like, for example, Google, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and they are very rapidly investing in biotech startups, or they are offering their computational resources to pharma companies and basically making strategic partnerships. And as well, they are trying to kind of apply their computational resources to very basic biology research, like, for example, Google's DeepMind applying AI for solving the 50-year grand problem in biology and predicting the conformation of the proteins. Another type of players that is quite unusual and was not available like some, I guess, 10 years ago is some remote robotized labs, which are basically a new way to do research remotely. Essentially, these kind of players bring robotized lab infrastructure through the cloud analytical data infrastructure, where you can essentially send instructions about some experiments, and then the lab can perform experiments and even optimize experiments using predictive analytics and AI. And it's very important also to know to mention big data providers. The AI thrives on data, and when pharma companies are adopting AI as a new tech, essentially they become kind of dependent on the providers of data, because a lot of data now becomes available for the drug discovery research, like data from healthcare wearables, mobile applications. This is data from electronic health records and various biobanks, and a lot of data from pharmacovigilance studies, and etc. And this data was not really used on a big scale earlier without AI, but now this data becomes gold for the pharmaceutical research. And so such providers of big data becoming essentially strategic partners to do research. And finally, infrastructure providers, which is primarily the cloud infrastructure providers. And the biggest, I guess, the biggest example is Amazon Virtual Machines. This is, but also Microsoft Cloud and other providers, which are now powering most of the analytics projects by healthcare companies, by AI, by pharma companies. And again, this technology becomes essential for the whole thing to work, because AI can thrive on data, but the only way you can do AI project is essentially on some elastic cloud infrastructure. It's very interesting to see how the landscape of collaborations looks like if we talk about big tech corporations. And so as we see, there are a number of collaborations between big tech and big pharma, where they sort of trying to combine drug discovery expertise with infrastructure and AI expertise of big tech, and also a lot of collaborations in terms of big tech companies working with smaller biotechs or drug design boutiques. Big tech companies are also kind of significantly investing in the companies in this space, and also there is not a lot, but several merger and acquisition deals that also occurred in recent years. Just to illustrate this new commerce and the type of deals that are now happening in this space, there's in terms of computational infrastructure, for example, there's Takeda, which partner with Amazon Web Services, and essentially using their infrastructure for their projects. Or recently, Eli Lilly and Stratios collaborated to essentially launch remote control robotic cloud lab. And Stratios, among the first labs of this kind, which is bringing the pharma to a new level of robotization. And also big data providers, this trend of working with them dates back like for several years now. GSK, Roche, AstraZeneca, Amgen, and other companies, they actually started kind of trying to leverage this big data sources quite some time ago in the anticipation of the new AI disruption. But AI is not just a tool to improve research, it is an enabler of new business models. And what I mean by that is that the AI is not just an incremental, informatics tool to do some particular stuff, but it is actually a changer of the way the R&D is done in general on the level of the organization. And I will describe several trends in this kind of model restructuring, business model restructuring. First of all, there is a new wave of CROs, CROs of new kind, I would say. This is biotech companies that started building some time ago, started building AI tools, and by now they built essentially the complete infrastructure and end-to-end systems where every process, all the stages of the process, starting from literature, analyzing literature, building concepts, and then identifying targets, discovering hits, and then proceeding to lead discovery and drug candidates. Essentially, it's done in one system, in one modular approach, where data essentially flows forth and back, and some learning process occurs. Just several examples of such companies like in Silica, Genomics, Hills, who actually build such kind of systems. And for example, in Silica just announced a major discovery of a new target and a novel molecule for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And this was done in under 18 months at a low cost. And essentially it was done using this kind of new AI system, end-to-end system. The next business model change, I already mentioned, this robotized cloud-based labs. I mean, the real labs which are remotely controlled, and the data is essentially analyzed in the cloud, and everything in terms of data processing, data manipulation, and analytics is done in the cloud. But the real experiment is actually done in labs remotely, instructed by the partners. And in this kind of way, it starts again with very basic instruction, might start with actual heat discovery program, and then some experiments can be performed. So this is the new wave of technology, and this is something that will be dominating the industry in some 5 to 10 years. This is just one example of such collaboration just recently in January, and a number of companies that are doing this kind of stuff. And finally, there is another very interesting thing that AI brings in terms of collaboration. It basically enables training using federated learning. It is now possible to start training models on shared data without actually compromising data. This one example is a Melody project which brought together a number of pharma collaborators, all of whom basically provided their data for the training, but they didn't expose data to competitors. This is only possible with the edge computing in principle, essentially the idea behind federated learning principle, where the global model is trained on local instances, and then only the results of training are basically brought back to the global server. And so each data on the local machines stays secret and is not shared. But the global server can be used in this case for the benefit of everybody involved in the whole collaboration. So key takeaways from this presentation are that essentially probably the most interesting thing in this area that a lot of newcomers are entering the pharma space, and new types of CROs emerge, not just functional CROs like some 20 years before, but actually CROs which do AI as a service for big pharma and biotech companies. And also big tech corporations. This is a kind of new beast in this forest, and also infrastructure providers, which are not just providers of services, but they become quite strategic partners for making things happen in the long run. Now, a new kind of partnerships and models for collaboration emerge, like federated learning, for example. So concluding this presentation, essentially, I would say that the pharma industry is going to kind of, platform-driven R&D, where a lot of things are happening in the AI-controlled fashion on the vertically integrated business model. Essential, where data basically flows between different partners, departments, etc., and it is used in the learning loops where it can be improved upon by successive experiments, and then learning model based on the data obtained. Of course, this means that collaboration in general becomes a new norm in the pharma industry. It now is much more diversified because it is impossible to build this kind of global infrastructure, including big data, AI, clouds, servers, and everything, without extensively collaborating with peers from technology industries and etc. And so this is kind of a new ecosystem that we now see being built in the pharmaceutical space. So in order to get more insights about the things, I would encourage you to reach out to us for our proprietary analytics services, where we essentially have much more insights on all this data and trends. And also, there's a little intro to our upcoming reports that are going to be published in a couple of months, and they will primarily focus on stem cells, healthcare landscape overview. Then we will expand on the application of AI in oncology area, quite interesting findings there. And then we will review more closely technology companies that are now entering and redefining the pharma industry. And of course, we will soon publish our updated landscape report summarizing the AI ecosystem in general. And with that, I'm concluding the presentation, and I'd like to say that we're open for strategic collaborations on joint analytics and industry rating reports. So welcome to reach us to participate in some of the reports and help us create better reports by sharing some insights, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrey. It's been very insightful, and 2020 was indeed a remarkable year for biotech. I have to apologize to the audience because I've experienced the unexpected technical difficulties with my headphones and microphone. So I understand that not everyone can hear me well. So I will therefore ask my colleague Franco Cortez to step in now, assuming that I continue to have quality of the sound issues.
Sure, it would be my pleasure entirely, Kate. Hello, everyone. I'm a colleague of Kate's. My name is Franco Cortez, and I'm Director of Aging Analytics Agency, the longevity-focused analytical subsidiary of Deep Knowledge Group. My apologies, Kate, for these unforeseen hardware issues. I've been witness personally to your gracious moderation skills, and I was very much looking forward to your moderation of the roundtable later today, but I'll do my best to fill in. I'm sure it won't be half as good as what you would have done, but c'est la vie. So thank you, Andrey, for that very insightful presentation. That was great. I do have a question for you, if you're open to questions. So it's clear that the overall volume of collaborations in the pharma AI space is heating up a lot. What are some of the foremost challenges, you would say, for pharma corporations in particular in onboarding these AI technologies and techniques in their R&D programs?
Well, thank you, Franco, for the question. Yeah, indeed, indeed there are challenges, and I would say one of them relates to scarcity in talent, because AI is a kind of new thing, and especially when it is applied to such domain-specific area as drug discovery, it is a even much harder task to do. And generally, it is known that the market of the specialists who can do this, or especially who can lead project like that with global vision, is fairly competitive. And you have to kind of take into account that big tech companies are now aggressively competing for this talent, and smaller biotechs and entrepreneurial ventures are also competing and offering quite lofty conditions for such specialists. So big pharma is essentially competing now with quite an ecosystem of players for the talent. This is one issue that comes to my mind.
Okay, well, if there are any pharma executives in attendance today, I'd say that that's a pretty actionable key point to take away with you. Thank you, Andrey. Quite insightful indeed. Our next speaker today is Ihor Kenduhov. He's based in Berlin. He has a background in quant finance, AI, as well as deep tech. Ihor leads the big data and algorithmic analytics department of Deep Knowledge Group and Deep Pharma Intelligence by association. His educational background is in economics and biochemistry, and he does have experience as well in venture capital. with a focus of companies active in the spaces of AI, biotech, longevity, IT, and fintech. Eeyore is also the author of a number of scientific papers on the subjects of biomarkers of aging and longevity, as well as finance and macroeconomics. Eeyore, the floor is yours. I quite look forward to your presentation today.
Thank you very much, Branka, for this insightful and comprehensive introduction. And the topic of my talk is algorithms and data for deep tech investment analytics. Well, as it was already mentioned, basically the AI pharma market is booming, and the growth is measured by the thousands of percent annually. And in the case of publicly traded AI and pharma companies, we have the growth that is measured by hundreds of percent annually. And in order to deal with all this data, in order to extract value from it, especially from investment standpoint, we have developed Deep Pharma Intelligence Big Data Analytics dashboard. And this dashboard covers almost all entities present in the industry. Namely, there are more than 280 companies and more than 700 investors and more than 100 deals. Basically, it consists of an pharma industry landscape, industry database, and our analytical reports, which are both open access and proprietary. And when we were advancing this project, we have developed a similar platform for the longevity industry, which is much more comprehensive and which is much more detailed. It covers almost 20,000 of companies, and altogether it has more than 4 million data points, whereas in the case of AI and pharma industry, we have 40,000 data points. So it means that the data set is larger by an order of magnitude or even more. And here, the abundance of that data, the flood of data has enabled us to really implement very advanced artificial intelligence and especially deep learning tools. And what we have applied for deep pharma intelligence for drug discovery landscape was enhanced in the longevity investment dashboard. And the most applicable for the analysis of the AI pharma deals feature is our interactive online AI-based SWOT analysis system, which covers most of the deals in the AI and pharma industry. Basically, is this an automated AI-based data-driven way to evaluate AI and pharma deals quantifiably, tangibly, and very fast and precise. Basically, we analyzed about 200 various data points and combined them in 12 vectors of the business development, or let's say efficiency of the deals. And each this vector is basically a set of parameters, some mathematical equation that with appropriate weights and mathematical transformations that returns one single value, one single scalar for each aspect of the deal. And by doing so, we can not only see the strengths and the weaknesses of each deal, of each company entering the deal, but we can see as well the level of harmonization of the specific deal, the level of the balance between various aspects of its development. And our open access version of the algorithms is presented here. So it's not a black box issue. Of course, we have proprietary algorithms and proprietary SWOT analysis methodology, which is much more deep than presented here. But the first layer of this methodology is visualized on the slide, and it's open access. basically all you do not need to dive now a lot into the specifics of it. Just point that various colors, various lenses of the borders represent and reflect various mathematical transformations and connections inside the algorithms, and considering the abundance of the data and the level of the speed of the development of algorithms, we are doing this in such way that when we are developing new level of analytics, we just put our previous analytics online and just allow everyone to see the SWOT analysis results on our websites, which you can observe on the deep pharma intelligence big data analytics dashboard in the industry database in SWOT analysis section. Another feature which is very important and very relevant for the analysis of the AI and pharma deals with pharma and tech corporations is competitor matching. It basically means calculation of the distance between companies in terms of their business development. And it utilizes both conventional clusterization tools such as k-means algorithms and much more advanced tools such as various methods of unsupervised machine learning. And it allows us to find the closest companies to some specific companies, or let's say the closest competitors. And when we analyze a deal, we can see what similar companies we have and what differentiates this specific company from other ones. Another tool which can be applied for this purpose is interactive network diagrams, which enable us to define a company or investor in the context of the existing industry infrastructure. Basically, it analyzes funding rounds, collaborations, team networks, and various aspects of business development in order to see the connections between this company and other companies. And when we are trying to analyze a deal the company enters, we need to basically see what are the deals, or what are the, generally speaking, more generally, collaboration does this company have, and how all these collaborations fit in the context of this new one. Basically, almost all our technologies, especially what relates to AI, machine learning, and more conventional maths, which applies for our projects, are listed here, and they can be categorized into 4 main parts. It's that relate to our SWOT analysis, data aggregation, forecasting, and clusterization and competitor analysis. Whereas for the SWOT analysis, we apply more or less conventional tools such as just polynomial formulas and linear algebra. For data aggregation and for forecasting, various architectures of deep neural networks are applied, and the same is done for clusterization and competitor analysis. And another important feature of the analysis of the deals is the analysis from the standpoint of large pharma and tech corporations which are entering the deal. So previously we were talking kind of more or less from the standpoint of this AI startups and the technological and financial indicators that making them more or less attractive for the deal. Whereas now it is more about large corporations, publicly traded corporations that enter the deals with the startups. And here, stock market analysis is crucial. And we apply here both conventional econometric models and advanced artificial intelligence and deep learning tools, including first and foremost neural networks with LSTM layers and recurrent neural networks. Also, we apply various stock market simulations that enable us to test various trading strategies and investment principles. It is also important to know that financial analytics here is combined with technological evaluation of the companies and fundamental analysis of their cash flows. Generally, we have the following in the regards to the deals analysis. We have the following services for companies and investors. These services relate mostly to the deep SWOT analysis of the deals and benchmarking and ranking of the startups entering the collaborations. From the standpoint of investors, or from the standpoint of large pharma and tech corporations entering the deals, it can be considered as investment target selection and the analysis of potential deal targets and investment targets. Another important feature here is the search for potential competitors or matching with partners. So with that, I'm closing my presentation, and I'm thanking you for your attention, and I'm open for your questions now.
Thank you very much for that, Eor. Quite in-depth presentation indeed. I'm curious to what extent the various analytical technologies and approaches that you're using for the AI and pharma sector might be repurposed and reapplied to other deep tech industries, as well as how exactly you're avoiding the so-called black box problem in the development of your algorithms.
So yeah, basically, we have tried this approach. We initially developed these approaches for AI and pharma industry. It was our first iteration. And as I mentioned already in the presentation, so we have applied it much more deeply for the longevity industry. And we are trying to do so in other deep tech industries as well already by now. So namely in neurotech, space tech, and fintech. And basically, I think it is quite applicable and general approach for almost every deep tech industry. There is abundance of data, there is enough data. And I would say that among the industries I mentioned, the most applicable is the longevity industry, just because of the abundance of the data. And because of this, we can really extract value from advanced deep learning algorithms, because for example, the difference between just simple regressions and neural networks with various architectures is not very essential for AI and pharma, but for longevity is much more. We can extract really value from more advanced architectures. And regarding black box, yeah, so there are various methods and tools to do so. Firstly, kind of every algorithm, it doesn't exist in vacuum, yeah, and it should be validated and checked by experts firstly, and it should be validated by real results which are proven by the market. And we can develop really advanced tools, but without validation from the market, namely without financial indicators that allow us to see that, okay, this deal was successful, this deal was not successful, it cannot be done. So basically, two main tools to prevent this are validation by experts and validation by financial data. And also kind of when we apply both deterministic models and deep neural networks and just polynomial mathematical formulas, which are completely can be comprehended and understandable by humans and by experts, and only in the case only for the enhancement we use deep learning. So the main part of our algorithms is kind of constructed and created by humans.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Eor. And once again, a very insightful presentation indeed.
Thank you.
For anybody who's just tuning in now, once again, my name is Franco Cortez. I'm the director of Aging Analytics Agency, Deep Knowledge Group's longevity-focused analytical subsidiary. And today I'll be delivering a brief talk on the topic of how COVID-19 is fueling overall growth in biotech industry activity as well as investment. We seem to be running a little bit long today, so I'll keep this presentation shorter than usual. So global healthcare funding hit a new record in 2020, $80.6 billion in equity funding split across 5,500 deals. This included 187 so-called healthcare mega rounds as well, which is also a new record. We're also seeing substantial growth in the global digital health space. And overall, of the total set of healthcare companies that raised in 2020, we saw a total of 71 biotech companies alone, having raised 16 billion just in IPOs in 2020. And I think it's fairly clear that the COVID-19 pandemic is at least in part fueling this overall growth in biotech and healthcare funding, as well as industry activity, as it continues to accelerate government and industry cooperation and the speed of drug and diagnostic development, and as it continues to push the importance of health to the forefront of the public's mind. And indeed, our very own Kate Batts had an article on this topic, co-authored with Deep Knowledge Group general partner Dmitry Kaminsky, which was published in MarketWatch last year, in which they noted the growing trend of investors switching their attention and appetite from traditional assets and markets, which proved to be less relevant in the current age of pandemics, such as real estate, tourism, entertainment, etc., towards the biotech industry. And because preventive medicine and enhanced immunity are essential components of the growing trend of precision health generally, as well as the longevity industry and the notion of extended healthy longevity in particular, which, by the way, are strategically prioritized topics at Deep Knowledge Group, and which, in very simple terms, signify the full scope of techniques and technologies for optimizing general health over extended periods of healthy longevity. It's very clear, I think, that these developments will naturally and logically lead to a rise in longevity industry investments in particular as well. Thus, with COVID-19 spurring industry developments in biotech generally, and in preventive medicine, precision health, and longevity in particular, we can expect this trend to continue, forcing increasing numbers of the global investment community to realize indeed what they should have realized all along, which is that health is the new wealth, and that health itself is becoming increasingly recognized as the most valuable asset class. And while Dimitri and Kate made these general statements and forecasts in the summer of 2020, we indeed saw this play out in practice in Q3 and Q4 of 2020, and continuing in the same direction in Q1 of 2021. Both in biotech generally and in the longevity industry in particular. As you can read in Aging Analytics Agency's recently released Longevity Industry Digest, which can be accessed at aging/investment-digest. In 2020, the total volume of investments into longevity focused or related companies globally had crossed the $156 billion mark, of which 60 billion was raised just during the last year alone in 2020. Some of the major deals of 2020 included Sana Biotechnology, which raised 700 million in Series A financing, Q, which raised 481 million in grant funding from the US government, Freenome, which raised 270 million to advance their novel multiomics blood testing platform for early cancer detection. That was via a Series C round. Recursion Pharmaceuticals raised a $239 million Series D, led by Bayer. And Elevate Bio raised 170 million in Series B funding, focused on manufacturing their cell and gene therapies. Overall, longevity-focused and related companies saw 30% growth in investments compared to the previous year, with the total funding for the top 8 most funded such companies exceeding 500 million by the end of 2020. Among these top funders, so to speak, included BeiGene, Amwell, Turning Point Therapeutics, Sana Biotechnology, Q, Samumed, Tempus, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Freenome, and Gossamer Bio. These developments are also crossing over into the public equities and retail investment space as well, with an increasing number of longevity-related companies going public. And while the US still dominates the public markets in that regard, we are seeing increasing levels of growth in the UK and Asia. In addition to the increasing number of longevity-focused and longevity-related companies going public, we're also seeing an increasing number of already publicly traded longevity-related companies seeing their market caps increase year over year as well. I'll be exploring the topic of trends in the longevity investment landscape in greater detail during my talk for tomorrow's event. But viewers and attendees that are interested in learning more before that can again go to aginganalytics.com/investment-digest to learn more today. And of course can subscribe to future updates at the Aging Analytics Agency homepage in order to make sure that they remain informed of future updates and developments, including specifically future updates that will be made to the Longevity Investment Digest itself, which will be updated every financial quarter moving forward. Thank you very much for your attention today. I'd now like to introduce our guest speaker for today's event. That is Christopher Drummer, CEO of Polaris Therapeutics. Chris is both the CEO and a co-founder of Polaris Therapeutics. He studied molecular biology, biotechnology, and business informatics at the Technical University in Graz. And he has a background in the pharma industry, having worked for Fresenius, Innofor, as well as for an AI enzyme discovery company. Chris, welcome. Very happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear here. I will start sharing my screen now. And I hope that this is working. So yeah, first I would actually like to thank you, Andrey, and the whole team of Deep Pharma Intelligence Group. It's really a pleasure to give you some insights about, on the one hand, Polaris Therapeutics, of course, and also about the current situation in AI in the early stage drug discovery, and also on different R&D collaborations. So yeah, let's keep the overview about our company really short and sweet, so that we can jump in to like the other topics straight away. So Polaris was founded actually in 2020 and is based in Austria, in Vienna, and also Graz, where there is our headquarters. The team consists of subject matter experts in like almost all the different relevant areas one can think of, such as medicinal chemistry, machine learning, theoretical physics, biotech, and so on and so forth. So we're also currently hiring. So if you're an ML engineer in that area, please go through our vacancies and do not hesitate to contact us or myself anytime. I would be happy. Yeah, I guess you are all familiar with the most crucial problems in the early stage drug discovery that are depicted here. Of course, it's about always the costs and the times, and as well as about the 80% of the currently so-called undruggable targets. Typically, it takes around $2.5 billion and a lead time of around 15 years for a drug to hit actually the market, right? That's just really insane, and we're really in the need to overcome that kind of bottleneck. For everyone here in the audience who is like not familiar with the term undruggable targets, I would be happy to introduce that to you. So these are, for instance, pathogenic proteins that do not possess a pronounced cavity and that are really hard to drug with state-of-the-art therapeutics. Especially AI tries to tackle these problems and also the undruggable targets. And there's plenty of different options one can go with. As most of the participants already know, I guess, there's also different machine learning approaches that are trying to overcome these challenges, such as supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and so on. And the same, of course, applies for artificial neural networks and deep neural networks. And choosing one of, like these kind of tool sets is in the end the most important task in overcoming any data-driven challenge. Recently, there's also been many discussions about finding the right molecular representation. For instance, Alana Sporogusic, who is a professor at the University of Toronto, and his group suggested a more sophisticated representation, overcoming the deficiencies of so-called smile strings with so-called selfies. We here at Polaris focus on graph representation learning, or sometimes also called geometric deep learning, which is also an upcoming area of interest for many different machine learning researchers in the pharmaceutical industry. And then there's also the generalizability and the benchmarks for R&D collaborations between specialists on the one hand that are dealing with AI, and on the other hand, the big pharma players. There's always the need to prove that the AI adds something to the value chain of the big pharma players. Many providers of such solutions are just focusing on really specific problems. As the data itself, I think that was mentioned already kind of several times here, itself is really a treasure. And building a generalizable deep learning model can only be done by paying some kind of costs. And it's also important to benchmark models against frameworks that are evaluating machine learning approaches, such as the therapeutic data commons that is depicted here, and also the molecular sets, also called MOSAs, from Alex Saveronkov and in silico medicine. Since pharma R&D and computational chemistry are also, of course, evolving all the time, it is important for machine learning to also participate on all of these different developments. One example, for instance, is Protex, which are currently one of the hottest topics in the pharmaceutical industry. And for everyone who is not yet familiar with Protex, I would like to also introduce you to those. As I stated, these are like an emerging class of therapeutics able to change the targets from so-called undruggable to at least degradable. And Protex, they do not require an active site cavity. They can really grab any nuke, any cranny crevice, as they do not sit directly on the pocket itself. And we see potential for them to actually surpass the two hottest drug development areas of all time, which are, of course, the protein kinase inhibitors on the one hand, and also the monoclonal antibodies on the other hand. And if you're a part of a pharma company that is actually dealing with Protex and are currently seeking for R&D collaborations in that area, I would be really happy to connect with you after this webinar, of course. The market for AI in pharma, which was also mentioned previously, is currently really exploding. And I'm sure that in 2030, latest, every drug that hits the market will have been developed by AI, and with means of AI. So this means that big pharma will be more kind of a manufacturer and also like a distributor in the future, I believe at least. And rising costs and falling sales will further help like young companies such as us to establish themselves in that area for sure. Here you can see some of the most prominent risks for the usage of AI in life sciences, I guess. While doing business development, at least we have seen that still many pharma scientists tend to use just simple decision trees and explainable AI, so to say, instead of like black box approaches such as deep learning. And that's often just due to the policies that are kind of antique and involved in the pharmaceutical industry. And one should be really aware of that while doing business development. Also, patents in that area require specific use cases. And of course, highly qualified scientists and engineers in the intersection of AI and life science are rather hard to find than easy. And furthermore, there is little to no standards for doing it right as an investor, I guess, which is also kind of a risk. And for us, the lessons learned in the last months is, that we, in the end, all live in kind of different worlds, especially in a highly specialized domain, like at the intersection of AI and pharma. And your partners must really know your industry well, so you see the same things and speak the same language in the end. With also all the possible seductions and of providing services or somehow start side projects, they always focused on your sweet spot. It's really important. Don't let yourself like distract for short-term money, and keep accelerating and gain traction with your really own USP. And while starting a business is like kind of a self-structuring itself, I guess it's very important to identify the most critical milestones in your path to PyPace, or tackle them and reduce your overall risk, kind of. And also, in like the last sentence I want to leave here, despite the best planning, you will always face circumstances you didn't calculate at all. So you will have to deal with them without getting too frustrated, I guess. And finally, I really want to do kind of a shout out to Deep Pharma Intelligence and the whole group. They really provide awesome reports and are always supportive when one is facing questions regarding business intelligence. Thank you very much. That's it from my side.
Thank you for that, Chris. I do have a question for you on the topic of finding the right partners. I'd be interested in hearing if you have many specific selection criteria in selecting your investors. In particular, we're quite aware of the fact that often investors are more than just a source of funding. It's important to choose investors that actually know what they're doing and know the specific space that you're active within. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
Awesome question. Yeah. For us, it was honestly always more about smart money, I guess. If you find investors that are currently already active in the field and have built a whole ecosystem and network around AI and drug discovery, rather just go with them, I guess, even if the conditions might not be as good as from someone who is just offering plain money. That's all I can say regarding that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And thank you once again for joining us today. A very interesting area of work and a very interesting presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to welcome everybody back in to take part in today's roundtable discussion, during which we will be discussing a variety of events within the general theme of AI and pharma collaborations and R&D partnerships. Including all of our speakers today. My first question, which is an open question, everybody feel free to chime in. It's clear that 2020 was a major year of intensive activity in the AI and pharma collaboration partnership space. I'd be interested in hearing everybody's forecasts and predictions on what 2021 might be remembered for in terms of overarching significant developments in this space. Any takers? Perhaps you, Andrey.
Yeah, so it's a good question, Franco. I would start this panel discussion just by sharing my thoughts on that. So 2021 is certainly going to be a different year from 2020 in many ways, because the kind of growth not only in AI but in general in industry was the kind of growth that was in 2020 is beyond any explanation, and it cannot last forever. That's for certain. And with, in general economic terms, I would say some kind of correction might occur in many markets. But AI is nonetheless is going to be growing, in my opinion, because primarily because this is a systems thing, not just an incremental thing. And it's going to be used by an increasing number of players. And even though the economy might be a little bit, or maybe substantially, hopefully not, stagnating, the application of things like AI will be increasing rapidly in 2021. And I guess we will see some mergers and acquisitions actually, and the number of them growing because, you know, the pharma now will be competing in terms of growth, and they will be trying to kind of rapidly develop their not only drug pipelines but also, you know, technology, so to speak, pipelines to kind of dominate in the market. Something
And
like that.
sorry, go ahead.
Add here, may I? So I think it's unquestionable that we'll have more deals and collaborations and so on, but kind of it's more about quantity. And what's your thoughts about quality? So because we have more startups, we have more deals, and also I think we have more hype. And the question is kind of whether there is ongoing transition from quantity to quality, and how should we differentiate between really, you know, prospective ventures and projects and overhyped entities without any proof of efficiency in clinical trials, for example. And I think that at some point we'll have partial kind of bubble crash for overhyped startups, whereas there will be ongoing transition from quantity to quality. And in order to proceed with that, I think the whole analytics infrastructure in the industry must be kind of enhanced really compared to what is present in the industry now, just to keep in line with what happens in the R&D itself.
Interesting. And on the topic of hype, you mentioned you know, hype in startups. Do you see any sort of particular skew in terms of quality of R&D and work in that space from startups versus the increasing number of corporations, such as pharma corporations and even tech corporations that are beginning to get increasingly active in this space?
I mean, there is certainly a growth. I mean, well, I'd like to connect on both questions because you have touched upon a quite interesting topic. So the first, the Ihor's question is the hype, and basically it's indeed a lot of. I mean, everybody now is doing some kind of AI or at least advertising their thing, and it is indeed a problem, I guess. But in generally, we have been observing the space for quite some time now, and we see that there is a process of evolutionary process of, you know, of sifting through the hype, because some startups, they do show you know, publications, they constantly publish stuff, and basically they provide results in terms of technology validation. And also they partner with pharma companies, and I guess those are very tough on kind of checking the subject matter and doing some due diligence, etc. And we also do technical due diligence on a number of companies, and we see that leading companies right now in this area, they are actually very, very strong in terms of AI offering. But of course, there are some which went out of business even already. We have a number of companies who basically disappeared in this space. And of course, a lot of companies, they are just applying certain, you know, algorithms and claiming that they have AI system. But we all know that AI is not just a, you know, a small tool. It's not a Python library that you import to do some stuff. I mean, everybody does that. What we mean by the AI revolution in pharma is that the company builds a whole system, basically a loop where the experimental data is used back to train models, and the models then predict better, and then a new experiment is run, and etc. And this is all done possibly in some automatic way. This is what we call AI startup, AI company. It's not, I mean, just a company who uses, you know, some machine learning stuff to you know, their desktop. Because in that case, even I can claim that I'm using AI because I'm doing some analytics with AI, but it's not that like I'm using it in the system. And then coming back to Franco's question, regarding the pharma companies, I guess it's much. A lot of pharma companies are now indeed trying to build in-house systems, AI systems. It's incredibly strong trend now, and pretty much the top 20 biggest pharma companies are doing this in some way, in some area. Let's say some of them are trying to apply AI for imaging, processing images, let's say for diagnostic stuff. Others are trying to apply for very basic biology research. I guess the biggest application case is, of course, the literature mining data from literature. I guess NLP, natural language processing tools, are the biggest thing, because this is the most obvious, this most straightforward thing, you know, to basically make sense of all the literature on the market. Yeah, but the point is, it's very difficult to rebuild existing process, especially in such a regulated areas, pharmaceutical industry. It's much easier to build actually the AI-driven approach from scratch, like some biotech startups are doing. I don't know, like in Silicon Medicine, for example, they started as AI company and they built around this technology from the very scratch. They didn't need to change anything in their approach because they were born this way. And similarly, like other companies in this area. And so pharma company primarily, I guess their strategy is to acquire or invest in those companies. That's the way to grow and acquire expertise rapidly, because pharma doesn't have enough time, I guess, to rebuild the whole thing. It's virtually impossible or very difficult. Is it answering your question, or maybe I missed?
Oh, certainly, yes, yeah. A very, you know, a whole suite of insightful comments there, indeed. Now, it's fairly clear, at least to me, based on your most recent investment digest, the Deep Pharma investment digest, that the U.S. continues to dominate this space, both from an industry activity perspective and to some extent from an investor and funding perspective. I'd be interested to know if there are any other particular hotspots that are not, you know, the U.S. That seem to be emerging as potential rivals down the road for the U.S. And again, this is an open question. Everybody feel free to chime in.
Well, anybody wants to comment? I mean, I can add just my observations that certainly China is shining right now. And I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I don't think I'm exposing some, you know, some secret here. But indeed, China is investing a huge amount of money into this area, and with infrastructures and digital health, they kind of have access to data on actual patients. You know, a country with more than 1 billion population, they have a lot of data, even without partnering with anybody. So they have kind of unfair advantage in this. And this is one geographic area. And the other one is actually Canada. I would say Canada, because Canada is a cradle of, you know, of AI innovation. Like a number of top guys in this space, theoretical AI experts are from Canada, in fact. And I have written the article some time ago about startups in Canada, and I was impressed by how many of them are there actually. So yeah, it's just.
And you think that to some extent. Apologies, Eeyore. I was just going to note that it's interesting that you mentioned a density of AI specialists in Canada, and you would say indeed that is one aspect fueling the growth of Canada in this area, et cetera, that it's coming sort of bottom up from a identity of AI specialist perspective, because the whole notion of the AI race and the scarcity of AI specialists is something that I know that Deep Knowledge Analytics, through their AI and Pharma department years ago, talked about and highlighted in certain reports.
I would also like to contribute to the question regarding regional distribution of the industry and Asia particularly. So we have issued recently investment digest, AI and Pharma investment digest dedicated particularly to the Asia, which you can also see on the Deep Pharma Intelligence website. And basically, yeah, it's not a secret if I tell you, yes, it's the market is booming there as well, and for some indicators, the growth even exceeds general global parameters. But of course, it is absolutely clear that the market is not yet as mature as in the United States or in Europe even, and especially public market is not mature at all. Basically, the only company which managed to go public in the previous year was Deep Longevity, and if you have which is also kind of connected with drug discovery, but focused more on the longevity industry. And basically, what we expect in the next few years is that the development of the general market infrastructure, especially public market infrastructure in Asia, and this will hopefully contribute to the growth of the industry there as well.
I would actually also like to add something regarding the different hubs, and I think it's always really important to keep track of all of the different spin-off and the areas where actually research excellence is happening. So I strongly believe also that kind of the Cambridge area, London and Oxford are also very well known when it comes to investments in especially drug discovery and all of the related areas. Simply because you actually already have also like the network and stuff, and yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I would agree.
Indeed, it's nice to hear about the UK because you know, Deep Pharma Intelligence is a UK-based company for the most part, so that's nice. Thank you for that, Christopher. Well, I'd love to continue this discussion. It's going quite well, and all of your you know, counterpoised responses are quite insightful. But we're running out of time for today's event. So with that in mind, I'd like to share some closing remarks, if I may. Thank you all once again for joining us for today's event. This is just the first of a 2-day, 2-part event, so please keep that in mind. Thank you once again to all of our attendees, and particularly to all of our presenters and panelists today. It was very lovely having you. Once again, you are joining us today for Top Pharmaceutical Intelligence Deals in Market 2020 to 2021. In order to facilitate a broad discussion on major trends in the AI and pharma collaboration and partnership space. However, our follow-up event, at the same time tomorrow, March 3rd at 5 p.m. GMT, switches its focus away from collaboration and partnerships towards investment. So that event is titled Investment in M&A Deals, AI and Pharma Market 2021. We'll be joined by a number of expert panelists, including the majority of today's presenters, as well as Ian Inkster, who heads Policy Analytics at Aging Analytics Agency, and Deep Knowledge Group's general partner, Dmitry Kaminsky. And that event will essentially focus on key trends and takeaways in the AI and pharma investment landscape, drawing from key insights that are presented in Deep Pharma Intelligence's Investment Digest, which is available to interested viewers at deeppharma.tech/global investment digest. Once again, I'd like to remind our viewers to attend tomorrow's event if they're interested in receiving key investor-focused takeaways in this space, as well as to subscribe generally at the homepage of Deep Pharma Intelligence at www.deeppharma.tech in order to remain updated and appraised of further projects, releases, and the announcement of additional virtual online events focused on a variety of topics in the pharma and AI in pharma space. Thank you once again to everybody for attending today and for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again very soon.